Here we go.
Okay, so we're going to start with generic questions. What's your name?
Johanna Davila,
Current age?
58. Yeah.
Okay. Where you lived in Cuba?
Guinness.
Guinness. Okay.
You know how to spell that?
No, I'm going to type it in.
Guiness. It has the two dots on top of the U. I don't know what they call them.
That's all
You
right.
know what it is?
No, I have no idea. Okay. What social economic class were you and your family in at the time?
High middle class.
High middle class. So what were living conditions like?
Awesome.
Awesome. Well, I mean, like,
You had nannies, maids, chauffeurs, cooks.
oh wow. So how many people lived in your household?
In my household, we had an extended family house. Most people back then had extended family living with them. We had these two houses that were really big next to each other on about maybe 4 acres of land. And in my house, it was my grandparents, my uncle, my mother, my father, and myself and my brother. And in the other side, the other house lived my grandmother's sister with her daughter.
Okay. What jobs did you or your family members hold?
My grandfather was, they call it the captain of a sugar mill.
Okay.
Captain is what they call the person who oversees that particular sugar mill right under the administrator. And the sugar mill was owned by the Gomez Mena. Gomez, Gomez hyphen Mena, MEN. It wasn't owned by U.S. Sugar because most of the sugar mills in Cuba were owned and controlled by U.S. Sugar.
Because of Batista's.
No, not because of Batista, it's because they bought there. That's what they invested because Cuba had so many sugar mills. There were a lot of big corporations, American corporations there. There was U.S. Sugar and Del Monte, and maybe
No.
more.
Okay. Now, was your father the only one who held a job, or?
My father, yeah, he held a job, but he was a TV repairman. Okay. My grandfather was the captain, and my uncle, I think he was a gigolo. I don't know what he did. No, he was a student back then.
Okay. Did any of the women work, or
None.
all stayed at home?
All stayed at home.
Okay. What were your family's political affiliations at the time?
Well, back then, they were, at what era are you talking about?
Just whenever you lived there.
Initially, it was under Batista, and my father and my uncle and my cousins were involved in counter-revolutionary acts against Batista. So we had to leave in the middle of the night, and we came to Miami. I believe it was in 58.
Okay. I have like a question later on where you can like really get into.
Yeah.
So at the time, y'all were.
Pro
four?
Fidel. Yes.
Pro Fidel. Okay. So now we're moving on to the 1 to 10 question. So these are the ones where if you're like, I have no idea. It's
Okay.
So 1 to 10, how appropriate do you think U.S. involvement was in the Bay of Pigs?
Inappropriate, totally.
So like, would you give it a 1, 2,
I give it a -1.
a -1? Okay. How appropriate do you feel that Cuba was in the Cuban Missile Crisis?
A 1.
A 1.
Inappropriate. You should say how were the Russians because that was what happened. It was the Russians.
So there you go. 1 to 10, how appropriate do you feel that Russia was in the Cuban Missile Crisis?
Appropriate 1.
One.
Totally inappropriate.
1 to 10, how effective do you feel that communism is as a form of government?
It's terrible because the communism to be like a utopia, like it's truly meant, like Marx meant it, is impossible because of human nature and greed. There's always going to be somebody that has more power and more money, like there is now, because the people that are high in the government in Cuba live like kings.
And I read a book called, I turned it into a question on here, but it was called like Fidel Castro, Liberator, Rebel, or Dictator.
Yeah.
And that's exactly how they started it off. They like set up this huge image of Batista, like in
He was a bad person.
Yeah.
Okay, he was a bad person. In Florida, there were a lot of people in his government that were very corrupt. Look up the last name Aleman, Eman. Aleman. He stole the money, the milk money from the kids in Cuba. They would say this is the money for the poor kids in Cuba. He stole the money, and he bought Cape Coral, uh, not Cape Coral, Key Biscayne. On Key Biscayne, there's this place that is shit. I can't remember the name. Cape Coral, no. It's down the Rickenbacker Causeway, but he bought that the all that beach. He bought it, and he bought the Miami Stadium during that time,
Just with the milk money?
just with the milk money. Yeah, yeah. The only reason we are here in the United States is because of Cubans, their ability to they loved corruption, corruption. Easy money.
Um, so how effective do you feel the July 28th movement was?
What was that?
That was, it was basically like the start of the rebellion against.
Oh yeah, yeah. Julio 28. Yeah, it it was effective. It did work.
Um,
You know what the colors are of that day? Red and black.
Red and black.
Yeah.
How effective do you feel the Embargo Act was?
I think it's totally ineffective. It's not working. You should flood them with money and see how the people like it.
So 1 to 10, how much economic opportunity do you feel there is in Cuba, either individually or internationally?
2,
2,
very poor.
for both instances.
For both instances, like for example, I'll tell you a movie to watch. It's about there's a movie that shows the working class people in Cuba now. Everything has to be we call it por la izquierda, under the table on the left. Like there's a whole economy that's based on American dollars that are shipped to Cuba by the people who live here. But what happens is, I've noticed, because we've had very many types of immigration from Cuba at different times. The people that come here the latest aren't the same from the people that came earlier. Because earlier, for example, people would come and they'd be doctors. And they would get jobs as dishwashers, whatever,
In America?
in America, in order to get ahead.
Because you would get more money doing that than you would being a doctor.
No, they could. No. When we first came to the United States in the early '60s, the doctors over there, they wouldn't accept them here as doctors.
Oh, so it didn't transfer over.
It didn't transfer over, so they had to do the boards, unless they were lucky enough to be educated here, because a lot of Cubans were educated in the United States, and then they go back. If they were educated here, then it would transfer. But if not, they would have to start off and do like a course and pass their boards. So they would work at whatever they could in order to be able to support their family.
Okay, so that leads actually really well into the next 1 to 10. Economic opportunity in America for Cubans coming up.
Awesome. They have done. You could be in one building and the Cuban be the janitor and he be the CEO.
Really?
Yes. Do you know the former CEO of Coca-Cola was Cuban?
Really?
Yes.
I didn't know that. Okay, so now we're going to move on to our last section.
Yeah.
It's the personal and political
Okay.
section. So this was a lot of these are like when you were in Cuba. What did you know about Fidel Castro at the time?
I was a child. I was 5, so I didn't know much. All I know was I used to listen to the people talking after he showed that he was communism, because the thing was, in the afternoons, everybody would get dressed up. No matter if you're not going anywhere, just to sit on the front porch in a rocking chair and talk, the whole family. That would be every afternoon. And I used to hear them talk about how so-and-so's farm was taken over, about the grocery store that was commandeered, because he started taking things away from people.
Fidel did?
Yeah. He would commandeer them, like nationalize it.
Oh, okay.
You understand?
Yes, ma'am.
It's similar to what's going on in Venezuela now. Okay? Like they try to take the wealth away from the people so that everybody becomes,
So they can like redistribute it.
yeah,
All right. So
surely like we're going soon.
yeah, there you go. So with your opinions now and everything that you
Yeah.
come to terms with, Fidel Castro, liberator, dictator, or rebel?
Dictator.
And at the time, how did people kind of talk about him, from what you remember?
From what I remember, initially he was almost seen as a liberator. See, but what happened back then, there was he came to the UN. Google it, you'll watch his speech. He came to the UN, and he talked, and he says, "I am not a dictator," you know.
Yeah.
But what happened during that time was they call it. He was supposed to meet with the president,
Yeah,
but instead of meeting with the president, he met with Nixon, and I think he took it as an affront. See,
Fidel did?
Fidel. Fidel wanted to be a baseball player initially, and then he wanted to be in the movies. He was out in L.A. If he had made it big, life would be different for me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But it he's always been narcissistic, he's very charismatic. Extremely charismatic.
A lot like Che Guevara was, right?
No. Che was a murderer more.
Good. We're actually going to talk about that later.
Yeah. But he was very charismatic. You know? That's all it takes.
So actually, the next question is, Che Guevara, liberator or murderer?
He's a murderer.
So what changes, if any, do you feel that Che was responsible for during the Cuban Revolution
A
era?
lot of deaths.
A lot of deaths.
Yeah, he's Argentinian. Yeah.
So you don't feel that he really contributed to like the liberation
No.
movement so much?
I don't know if he did, but I just have a bad taste in my mouth when I see somebody with a Che t-shirt.
I know exactly what you're talking about. He's become such a pop
I don't know
icon.
why.
I don't get it either.
He's a murderer.
It's just, I think
It's like similar in Miami. You can look it up. There's an article that happened was at a hotel in Miami Beach at the Y. The W. They had a huge Che Guevara poster, painting, in their lobby, and all the Cubans went there and they got really offended. And it's to the point. It's tantamount to us to have a. Why don't you go ahead and put a portrait of Hitler on Miami Beach? You see how the Jews like it. Yeah, it's offensive.
Yeah. So, same question, but with Castro. What changes do you feel that he was responsible for?
Total destruction of the island, the ecology, the people, the morale.
So, like, not just the government, you feel he destroyed the whole...
Destroyed the people, the morale. Okay, because kids were taken away. Just imagine that they have your kids when they come 10 years old. They have to get taken to go to live to ir al campo. You have to go to the farms to work in the farms. You have to go plant sugarcane. You have to do whatever they tell you to do.
How young were these kids?
9 and 10. They come to your home and now it's time for them to go, and they have to go. And the boys have to go to the military by the time they're 15.
15?
Yeah, I don't know if it's like that now. But yeah.
It was then.
Yeah.
So this next question is kind of broad. You can really just
Yeah.
go as far as you want with it. Tell me the story of you leaving Cuba. Like, why you left, how, and...
Well, I actually left 2 times. I came back and forth a couple of times because what happened was my mom. The first time I left was with Batista, and I told you the story that when I was here, my mom would make me work, help her out, and I was maybe 3.5, 4. So when my grandmother called me from Cuba to see how I was, I told her my mother was poisoning me, and I wanted to go back to Cuba. She's poisoning me. I don't want to be here. So the next day, I guess my mom was pregnant with my brother then, so she didn't want to have to deal with me. So the next 2-3 days, my grandmother sent the ticket, and she put me on a plane to go back to Cuba, Pan Am, by myself. She said she told me, "You behave, watch the stewardess and behave." I sat down, fastened my seatbelt, and I was going home. Yeah, I was happy because
So wait, how old were you when you first left? You were 3?
3. So we went back, and then when the thing started going with Fidel. Remember, my dad was they consider him American, el Americano there. Okay, even though he had last name Gonzalez, he was the American. So he had to leave first and come to New York.
Did they force him to leave, or
No, he just left.
he just left? Okay.
We came to the United States before diplomatic relations were broken. So all you had to do is get a ticket on Pan Am and you were here.
Okay.
Okay, and my father, since he was a citizen, and my mom had the presence of thought of making us all U.S. residents, we didn't have any problem just getting on a plane and coming. So, but they were starting to get particular as to who they would let leave. So we left maybe like, I remember coming here in November because mom, we celebrated Christmas in New Jersey. But what happened during that time, my mom had a miscarriage in Cuba, like the day before she came here. She was pregnant. And when she got here, about a week later, she started hemorrhaging. And while this is get complicated, while she was in the hospital, she developed chickenpox.
Oh my gosh.
So they didn't know what the hell she had. Okay? Because, for them, the American doctors thought, oh my gosh, she's got some screwy disease from the islands. And my mother kept saying, it's chickenpox. So she told my father, put me on a plane to Cuba tomorrow. Or as soon as she came, he checked her out of the hospital against
To
all.
get treatment in Cuba, or
No, she just wanted to leave. She didn't want to be there. she was sick.
she's like, I'm done with this.
I'm done with this. I'm going back. So we went back to Cuba and promptly infected everybody
Oh my gosh.
with the chicken pox. And then when we were fine, we
So you
were
went
better.
back with her then?
Yeah, I went back, and then after the chicken pox was cleared and everything, we came back.
Okay.
Because she was like so freaked out, She left her country, she had a miscarriage, and now she has this. She just couldn't deal with it. So we went back, and then we just flew back to, come on, Newark, New Jersey, come on, Cuba. Newark was horrible. It had like snow like this, terrible. It was horrible. Yeah, it was like really, Newark, New Jersey was not a good introduction to the United States.
Go from like nice tropical weather to there's snow piled higher than I am,
Exactly.
Okay, so even though you were so young, did you have any expectations for America, or at
No,
that time? Was
at
it
that
just-
time I didn't. At that time, all that they would talk about was next year in Cuba because they thought that it wasn't going to last.
what wasn't gonna last? The
Fidel, he wasn't going to last in power. So at every Christmas, we would toast to next year in Cuba, next year in Cuba. And a lot of Cubans didn't buy property or anything because they didn't think it was going to last. But my mom was one of the smart ones. She bought a house right away when she got here. So, and I don't
you bought
remember.
a house in America.
Yeah,
Okay.
in Miami. After we came from Newark.
Okay.
We only lived in Newark for a year because my mom said, I'm taking off. I can't stand this.
Yeah.
And we actually had spent a lot of time in Miami when I was small because back then you could take a ferry from Havana and land into Key West. You could put your car on the ferry and land in Key West and you drive up in your car all the way to Miami. I remember one of those trips because I saw the flying fish. Yeah, because it's only 90 miles. Yeah.
Okay. I think. Well, those are all the questions I have.
All right.
There's
I was going to tell you about who else you should look up. You should talk to my brother, my son-in-law. He's an opinionated asshole, but he lived under Fidel for he was raised there until he was 15.
Okay. Could I get his email possibly, or his phone number?
I'll talk to him and then I'll let you know. Talk to him for him. He'll be happy to help you.
Okay.
And his mom lived under Fidel for a long time. She actually speaks German. They taught him, and they all some of them speak a lot of Russians. And now you see a lot of Cubans in Miami with Russian's name, like Vladimir Gonzalez. I swear, like really Ruski's first name and a Hispanic's last name.
Well, thank
Okay,
you so much.
you're
That's
welcome. My
actually so
pleasure.
helpful.
I'm trying to figure out what book, what articles you should look at. Look at the one from the UN,
The speech.
the speech,
Yeah, I wrote that down.
the speech from UN, and Aleman.
I wrote that down.
I'm trying to find out. One of his daughters is here in the United States. Fidel's daughter.
Do you know her name?
Oh,
I can probably find it online.
Yeah, Ana
Oh.
Fernandez or something like that.
I think Anna is the first name.
See, there's a lot of politicians in Miami. The last name is Diaz Balart.
Can you spell that?
Yeah, Diaz hyphen Balart. Balart.
Okay.
Okay, their claim to fame that they don't want to admit is that their aunt or the mother of the aunt of one of them was Fidel's first wife.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Does he have a wife now?
I don't know. I don't know. But I'm trying to remember. What else? Diaz Ballard. Um,
Did you notice any? Because I think I remember I was talking to Abuelo at one point, and he talked about how you'd be driving down the road, and there would just be like a little kind of shrine thing in Cuba, just on the side of the road. Are there any other like distinct cultural things that you remember about?
I remember the palm trees, the royal palms. They're big, tall.
Did you tell her about la carretera real?
I don't remember.
You don't remember?
I was 5.
Oh, well,
We can talk about that another.
And then there's
she's a little snob there.
okay, Edison. Look, there are a lot of Americans that had homes in Cuba. Okay, Hemingway. There's still a fishing tournament after Hemingway in Cuba. The Old Man of the Sea was written about a Cuban guy in a boat.
Really?
Yes,
A fisherman.
the fisherman. And Thomas Edison, he had a home there in
Really?
Cuba. Yeah, Thomas Alva. And then he bought a place in Fort Myers.
Oh, really?
And he liked the Cuban palms. Remember those the tall ones?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
he in after Cuba, he came here and he planted all the roads in how do you call it, in Fort Myers with those.
Really?
Yeah,
Oh, real.
yeah. And the other thing there, if you want to track a very wealthy Cuban now in Miami, his name is Manuel Diaz. He's very industrious.
I've heard of that name.
Manny Diaz.
Yeah.
He started, when he first came from Cuba, he would sell plants and stuff. And then he would, croton, how do you say it? ¿Cómo se dice en inglés?
Crotons.
Croton. So the plants, they're like, I don't know if you're familiar with them because I don't think they grow in Tennessee. They're very colorful plants. They have,
They're colored
their color, the leaves are different and they're colored differently.
But they don't have blossoms.
They don't have blossoms.
And they make hedges out of them.
But those trees, they grow from cuttings. Okay, so he started his business, his whole empire, with a café pilon can, putting dirt in, putting a cutting, and planting it.
Really?
And now he owns like shitloads of land, and he's got palm trees everywhere. Every expressway that you drive in Miami are his plants.
Really? Well, I have 2 crotons at home, 2 different varieties.
Yeah.
The yellow and the green.
But that's how he started.
Yeah.
Just the little things.
The little things,
Cuttings.
cuttings. There's still the Bacardis in Miami. I'm trying to think of another. Well, my ex-husband's family was very wealthy in Cuba, and they were related to, they like the Kennedys of Cuba.
Who?
Guillermo Fernandez.
Oh, Fernandez.
Yeah, he was very arrogant. Yeah. They're Kirsch Foods, that's their relatives. It's Quirch. They're a Fortune 500 company. Trying to think of who else. This other guy, Albert, ¿cómo se llama el tipo de related who's got all the money? Jorge Pérez. Jorge Pérez, ¿verdad? ¿Y cuál es la playa que está en el punto de Key Biscayne? Is it-
Camden Park?
No, after Camden Park, the one at the end. Isn't it Cape Coral?
I don't know. Google it.
I don't know. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Why?
No, nothing. I was trying to know because that beach was bought by stolen money from Cuba, milk money from the kids.
I can
Correct.
probably find it online. I
Yeah.
feel like that's something they'd have there.
Yeah. You should talk to Rudy because Rudy lived under communism for like about 15 years.
Really?
Yeah, and his mother too. My obnoxious son-in-law at times. Very opinionated.
And he lives in Miami?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
He's very cute.
He shows his husband.
Yeah. Jocelyn's husband.
Yeah, he's the only good thing that he has done is my grandkids.
You can, I don't know. Just pull it.
I'm really trying, guys.
That's all right.
I'm
Just
just
pull
gonna-
it open if you need to.
Yeah.
Just don't turn the light on.
Okay.
All right?
Yeah,
That-
thank you so much. That was
No
perfect.
problem. If anything, if I can think of any books or any things that you should look at, I'll
Well,
email them to you.
Tanya in there,
Yeah, I can-
in his
I can-
office, has a whole collection of books about Cuba.
Yeah, I think Abuelo said he was gonna give me a few to read. So.
Well, you might look at
Well,
the
who
titles.
else do you think she should talk to? 'Cause if I
She
have-
should talk to